and welcome back to my channel. I am Cheyenne, and welcome to night 4, which was supposed to be night 1 of my 23, formerly 31 nights of Halloween, where I will be doing a true crime, Halloween or story or urban legend that I am actually very interested in. While I do my usual everyday thing, it just really depends on what I feel like doing for the video. Before we get started, I know that my lighting is not great. I do hope to fix that in the future. However, the house that we're living in, I have to utilize lamps because I do not have a regular light in my living room. But anyway, before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and put a disclaimer out there that some of these stories, including tonight's story, is not really suited for anybody under the age of 13. So viewer discretion will be advised. So I wanted to let you guys know that tonight's video, as well as my entire series, is inspired by different true crime YouTubers such as Bailey Sarian, who is one of my all-time favorite YouTubers. Definitely check out her Murder Mystery Makeup Mondays, and as well as Kendall Ray. So definitely give them a like and a subscribe. Go to their channels, show them some love. Okay, so let's get started. So we all, when we were kids, have heard at least one time about be careful of going to strangers' houses because you never know what you're going to get in your Halloween bucket. And when I was a kid, I used to hear a lot about parents talking about how they were worried about their kids getting random things in their candy. So like many responsible parents, my parents would always be concerned about what was in our candy bucket, especially when my brother and I got old enough to go trick-or-treating on our own. And they would always check our candy buckets. You know, that was the whole reason for them checking our candy buckets, not because they tried to or wanted to steal our candy, or at least the good pieces of candy anyway, not at all. Anyway, I heard a lot of stories growing up, and these stories I honestly thought were just urban legends until I did some digging and found out that one of these stories was actually very real. And the more that I read into it, the more disturbed I got, because, you know, as somebody who is eventually going to have their own kids, I kind of have a feeling that I'm going to be one of those worried parents. Anyway, the story that we're going to talk about tonight is the story of, well, he goes by quite a few names. The story of the Pixie Stix Killer, Candyman, the original Candyman, and I don't know if it was or not. Can somebody tell me in the comments below if the story was actually inspired the movie Candyman? Like, I know it doesn't directly, and it's not directly inspired by it, but still, it makes you wonder. But anyway, while I was trying to figure that out, I almost just spilled my entire makeup basket. Anyway, so the story tonight is going to focus more on the victim of the Candyman Pixie Stix Killer guy than it is the actual guy in general, because my main concern is focusing on him than on the actual killer. So the story is about Timothy O'Brien, and he was born on April 5th, 1966. And his parents were Ronald and Diane, something like that, O'Brien, and he had a younger sister named Elizabeth. So Timothy was 8 years old when this story takes place. He was going trick-or-treating with his sister and his dad and their neighbor and the neighbor's 2 kids. And according to the dad, whose side of the story I'm actually going to talk about first, according to him, they were walking around, everything was going fine. They were doing their trick-or-treating, and they get to one of the houses on their block, or in their neighborhood, I don't know. Anyway, they get to this house, and they're knocking on the door, nobody's answering, and kids being kids, they are going to be more concerned with getting that candy than waiting at the door. So they run off and go to the next house. So Ronald goes back to the house, and this time someone answers the door, and according to him, he opened the guy opened the door, and all he saw was a hairy, this was his description, was a hairy arm and a hand that had 5 21-inch Pixie Stix, so the long Pixie Stix. And Ronald took the Pixie Stix and went back to the kids, and they each got a Pixie Stick. Well, the 5th Pixie Stick, because there were 5 and there were only 4 kids, the 5th Pixie Stick went to a 10-year-old boy that Ronald happened to see, that they went to church with. So all of the Pixie Sticks have been distributed. Well, they call it a night. They get home, and the little boy, he's 8, come on. Little Timothy, he wants some candy before he goes to bed. So Dad says, sure, go ahead, whatever you want, go through and pick you out a candy. Well, Timothy chooses, lo and behold, the Pixie Stick. So Timothy is trying his best to get this Pixie Stick open, but he's not having the best of luck. So his dad helps him get it open and helps him get all of the powder loose and mixed together. Well, Timothy, he opens it, gets him a big old mouthful of sugar, and he eats the Pixie Stick. Well, he starts complaining that the Pixie Stick, it has a bitter taste to it. And Ronald, being the very attentive father, got Timothy a glass or a cup of Kool-Aid to try and wash the bitter taste out of his mouth. Well, at that point, poor little Timothy, he just starts vomiting everywhere. Goes to the bathroom, and he is just having this vomit episode. And all of a sudden, they're trying to comfort him. They're trying to let him know, hey, you're okay. It's going to be okay. Well, the next thing that Ronald knows, little Timothy, I mean, this innocent little 8-year-old kid just goes limp. And so I don't know if they reported that he stopped breathing or what. All I read is that he just went limp. So they called 911 like any concerned parents are going to do. The O'Briens call 911 and the paramedics get there and they rush little Timothy to the emergency room. And unfortunately, you know, this poor little kid. I mean, he like I've said, he's 8. But this poor little kid, by the time they got him to the hospital, had unfortunately passed away. The police were trying to figure out what happened to this kid. You know, he was perfectly, or at least it seemed like he was a perfectly healthy kid. So what in the hell killed him? Well, they found out that what had killed him was cyanide poisoning. And turns out the cyanide was mixed in his pixie stick. Of all things, in his pixie stick. I mean, it's awful. And all of this happened, as far as like him getting sick to passing away, happened within less than an hour of him ingesting the candy. So naturally, you have got parents freaking the F out because this little boy was killed by somebody who gave him poisoned Halloween candy. And they turned in all the kids in the community, the parents turned in their candy thinking that it had been laced or poisoned with something. And thankfully the little neighbor kids, thankfully they did not eat the candy, nor did the little sister. But everybody was freaking out, and I mean rightfully so, because if your kid has Halloween candy and one of the kids in your community mysteriously dies from Halloween candy, what's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna freak the hell out and try and figure out, you know, what if my kid has poison candy? So they all got it tested and everything else. None of the other kids, except for the 3 other children, the sister and the neighborhood kids, had the Pixie Stix, except for the 10-year-old church boy. Thankfully, the parents found him with the Pixie Stick and it was unopened and he was clutching it in his sleep. But like I said, everyone freaked out. And would you not freak out? I would definitely freak out. It turns out that the Pixie Stick packages had been opened and the top 2 inches had been poured out and replaced with the cyanide. And they had actually been restapled to make it look like they were full and they hadn't been tampered with. Which, honestly, in my opinion, how do you not notice? I mean, this is the 70s, so I don't know if people checked their kids' candy back then. But, I mean, still, you're gonna freak the hell out if you look through their candy and you notice that they're stapled instead of glued. Because a lot of candy wrappers, they come glued. Some come stapled. But like, I don't know if Pixie Stix come stapled or not. They might. I don't know. But anyway, if they had checked it, they probably, rightfully so, would have freaked out. The Pixie Stix, like, you know, all the other candies, they were taken and checked, and turns out the amount of cyanide that was in the packets, though at least the one that was in little Timothy's, had enough cyanide in it to kill 2 adults, and the rest of them had enough to kill 3 adults, which that's kind of messed up if you ask me. However, I still think the other kids got hella lucky. Anyway, so the police started questioning the parents naturally. You know, like, what happened? You know, they questioned the neighbor and Ronald more than they questioned Dan, because they had all been together when this happened, or at least for a minute they were all together. They were all trick-or-treating together. But anyway, they went through the whole interview process, things like that. Just a little side note, it was actually raining the night that this happened. And so they did not go very far when it came to their trick-or-treating. They only went to 2 different streets, and when the police asked Ronald, you know, hey, which house did the whole Pixie Stick thing, because, you know, maybe if we can find him, we can get your son some justice. Well, this guy could not remember exactly where the house was. I'm sorry, your kid, your 8-year-old kid on top of that, was killed by this guy who gave you the Pixie Stix, and you don't remember where his house is? Okay. Anyway. So they automatically, that's kind of a red flag. And then when they found out that he couldn't remember things like that, they got a little more suspicious, because it had been, not only had it been raining, but none of the families, none of them, had given out Pixie Stix that night. So why would he lie about that? Well, he walked with police 2 or 3 times and finally got to the house. He magically remembered where the house was. So they get to the house, knock on the door, there's no answer. And they ask him, you know, what did this guy look like? Oh, well, he had a lot of hair on his arm. You know, I really didn't get a good look at him, because, you know, I couldn't see. But the house actually came back to a guy named Courtney Melvin. And Courtney was an air traffic controller. And he had actually been at work Halloween night and did not get home until about 11 p.m. And after checking his alibi, the cops went ahead and ruled him out as a suspect. As the police keep looking into the O'Brien parents, and at this point, they're not even really looking at Dan, it's all Ronald. So after looking into him, they found out that Mr. O'Brien, not who he said he was. Well, he was, but at the same time, he had some demons in his closet. What kind of demons, you ask? Well, the kind that had over $100,000 in debt, which today would be close to about 500,000, something like that from what I read. And he had actually been suspected of thieving at his last job, and he had actually held a crap ton of jobs, like that he had somewhere about 21 jobs in 10 years before the murder happened. And he had defaulted on a bunch of bank loans. His car was about to be repossessed. He was about to be fired at the job that I mentioned that he was suspected of thieving from. And he had actually taken out 2 life insurance policies on his kids. Both of them he had insured for $10,000 apiece. And then, about a month before poor little Timothy was killed, he took out an additional $20,000 on both of his children. And you would think if you worked at an insurance company, I mean, even though they were like, hey, probably not a good idea to take all of this money out on your kids, you know, I'm sure they objected at least a little bit. If not, there's some crappy ass insurance people. I mean, you would think at least just a little bit that something just isn't right here. And oh my god. Anyway, you would think something's a little sus, a little sketchy. And he got the life insurance, and honestly, I am pretty sure that I am gonna do a lot of these stories where these parents take out these life insurance policies and then all of a sudden their kids die, which honestly is just like, I get needing money, but I'm not gonna take out life insurance on my kids just because I need money. Like, in total, he had taken out $60,000 on his 2 young children. And what makes it even worse, and I am not gonna lie, this makes me, even if I didn't know what happened, this would make me so sus of this guy. The morning after his son died, when he should be, grieving, calls the life insurance people and inquires about claiming life insurance. Yeah, because that doesn't have, sus written all over it. And then they found out that he had actually been to a chemical supply store. And of course, he left and didn't buy anything, but that's besides the point. Anyway, that is about the time that the cops started suspecting Ronald. What the cops came to the conclusion of was that Ronald O'Brien had taken the chemical cyanide and poisoned these candies, and in an attempt to kill his 2 children, and tried to cover it up by giving the other 3 children the Pixie Stix as kind of a, well, they all had them, so I couldn't have done it. November 5th, 1974, Ronald O'Brien was arrested for the murder of his son, Timothy. And this actually, I think, is kind of poetic justice to me, because he had been friends with a pathologist who claimed that he had actually asked him how cyanide worked and how much would be lethal. Then the guy at the chemical supply store said that he had come in asking about cyanide, and different ones were talking about how he suddenly had this massive interest in cyanide and poison. Well, his in-laws, the day of Timothy's funeral, said that he had talked about using Timothy's life insurance money to go on a nice vacation and pay off different expenses. And this is the kicker, and I actually love this. His own wife said that Timothy actually did not choose the poison candy, that his father, Ronald, had actually forced him to choose the Pixie Stix. The entire time, though, this guy is, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never kill my son. Everybody's a liar in this room. Like, everybody's lying right now. Even my wife over there, she's supposed to be here supporting me, and she's lying on me. Y'all, whatever. Ronald maintained his innocence and was openly declaring, I did not kill him, I'm innocent, and he honestly believed that he would be able to convince the jury that he was innocent and be acquitted. The jury actually only took about 46 minutes to convict Ronald O'Brien and find him guilty of murdering his 8-year-old son. And he was sentenced to death. So Ronald actually was although he was sentenced to death, he actually had his execution date was actually pushed back 4 different times. The first date was pushed back because his lawyer had actually filed for a stay of execution, which had been granted. The second was postponed as well. I'm not really sure why for that. They didn't say. However, the third time that the execution was scheduled, it was Judge McSpadden who set the date and personally offered to drive Ronald to his execution. Last time that the lawyer tried to push the execution back was actually the 28th of March 1984, and he tried to say that the reason was because lethal injection, which is what he was told he was going to die by was cruel and unusual punishment. However, thankfully, the judge denied this. Like, nope, you know what? We're tired of you being here. You know, you deserve what's coming to you, and pretty much said, no, nope, it's not gonna happen. You're gonna die, and you're gonna die ASAP. And finally, March 31st, 1984, Ronald O'Brien was executed by lethal injection. And there were over 300 demonstrators for this man's execution. I do not know if his wife, well, ex-wife, because she filed for divorce, and rightfully so, because I mean, this man killed her child, so bye-bye. Anyway, she had full custody of their daughter Elizabeth. Um, and from what I read, and this actually was a little bit funny to me. They actually, some of the people outside of the execution area, the prison, actually were chanting and screaming trick or treat while this was going on. And then, of course, you have the anti-death penalty people over here. And there were some other demonstrators who would take candy and dump the candy on these anti-death penalty protesters. And honestly, I really am kind of on the fence when it comes to the death penalty, because yeah, some people, they do deserve the whole eye for an eye thing. Then again, there are some people who I really just don't know. I mean, that's a debate that I really try to stay away from. That and several other things that I'm just, I don't know. I really don't know where I stand with it. But definitely debate, not debate, because people can get a little crazy, a little nasty. Um, if you're going to debate this very civilly, please debate it in the comments below what you think of the death penalty, and should Ronald O'Brien have been executed. The lawyer's argument was that it was cruel and unusual punishment and he didn't deserve it, and all of that. So, I mean, do you guys think that he should have been executed, or do you think that he should have just spent the rest of his life in prison? That is the very sad and kind of poetically justified story of Timothy and Ronald O'Brien. And I do hope that you enjoyed our first story. And if you did, leave a like and subscribe. And we will see you guys tomorrow night with another story. Bye, guys.